You wake up to the sound of wooden cartwheels rumbling over cobblestones, the sweet aroma of fresh bread drifting through your window, and voices already echoing from the forum below. It's 50 years after Christ, and Rome is alive with the energy of 1,000,000 souls going about their daily lives. But what was it really like to be a Roman? Not the emperors and generals we see in movies, but the ordinary people who made this empire tick. The baker kneading dough before dawn, the senator adjusting his toga before an important speech, the mother teaching her daughter how to weave, the slave carrying water jugs through narrow streets. Their world was both remarkably similar to ours and completely alien at the same time. They worried about money, gossiped with neighbors, fell in love, raised children, and complained about the weather. Yet they also lived in a society where your clothes could literally determine whether you lived or died, where sharing a communal bathroom sponge was perfectly normal, and where watching people fight to the death was considered family entertainment. Today we're going to step into their sandals and discover what daily life was really like for the people who built the greatest empire the ancient world had ever seen. We'll explore their homes, taste their food, understand their fears, and uncover the social rules that governed every aspect of their existence. From the moment a Roman opened their eyes in the morning until they closed them at night, their day was shaped by traditions, superstitions, and social expectations that had been passed down for centuries. Some of these customs might shock you, others might seem surprisingly modern, but all of them reveal the humanity behind the marble statues and grand monuments. So take my hand, and let's walk together through the streets of ancient Rome, where every corner has a story to tell and every person we meet has lived a life both ordinary and extraordinary. Because understanding how the Romans lived their daily lives isn't just about the past, it's about understanding ourselves and the threads that connect all human experience across time. Let me tell you about Marcus, a typical Roman citizen who's just woken up hungry. As he stumbles to his kitchen, he's thinking about the same thing every Roman thought about first thing in the morning: food. But his breakfast is going to be very different from yours. The foundation of every Roman meal was built on 3 pillars that sustained the entire empire: wheat, olive oil, and wine. These weren't just ingredients, they were the lifeline of civilization itself. Wheat fields stretched across North Africa, olive groves covered the Mediterranean hillsides, and vineyards dotted the Italian countryside, all working together to feed the greatest empire the world had ever known. For the poor like Marcus's neighbor Gaius, breakfast meant a simple bowl of pulse, a thick porridge made from wheat that filled the belly without emptying the purse. Gaius would stir his wooden spoon through the steaming mixture, sometimes adding a bit of cheese if he'd had a good week, or maybe some honey if the gods had smiled upon him. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept him strong enough to work another day in the bustling streets of Rome. But if you had money, oh, the possibilities were endless. The wealthy Romans turned eating into an art form that would make today's food critics weep with envy. They discovered something that would become the ancient world's most beloved condiment: garum. This fermented fish sauce was everywhere in Roman cooking, splashed onto everything from vegetables to meat like we use ketchup today. The smell was intense, the taste was complex, and Romans absolutely couldn't get enough of it. Picture this. You're invited to a wealthy senator's dinner party. You recline on a comfortable couch as slaves bring course after course of delicacies. Roasted peacock arrives with its feathers still attached for dramatic effect, dormice stuffed with nuts and honey, and exotic fruits shipped from the far corners of the empire. The wine flows freely, sweetened with something that makes it taste divine, but carries a deadly secret. Here's where the story takes a dark turn. Those wealthy Romans, in their pursuit of the perfect wine, added lead to make it sweeter. They had no idea they were slowly poisoning themselves with every sip. Some historians believe this lead poisoning may have contributed to the empire's eventual decline, as generations of Roman leaders suffered from the effects of chronic lead exposure, leading to poor decision-making and erratic behavior. The contrast between rich and poor was staggering. While Gaius scraped the last bits of pulse from his bowl, The wealthy were so focused on pleasure that they built special rooms called vomitoria, where guests could empty their stomachs and return to feast again. The word sounds shocking to us, but to them it was just practical. Why let a full stomach stop you from enjoying more delicious food? This wasn't just about eating, it was about survival, status, and the very fabric of Roman society. Your food told everyone exactly where you belonged in the social hierarchy, and every meal was a reminder of whether you were blessed by fortune or struggling to make it through another day in the eternal city. Imagine walking down a Roman street and being able to tell someone's entire life story just by looking at their clothes. That wasn't just possible in ancient Rome. It was essential for survival. Your outfit didn't just make a fashion statement. It declared your legal status, your wealth, your profession, and sometimes even whether you had the right to live. Let me introduce you to Lucius, a young Roman man getting dressed for an important day. He's standing in front of his bronze mirror, but he's not just choosing what to wear. He's choosing who he gets to be in Roman society. Today, for the first time in his life, he's putting on a toga. Not just any toga, but the pure white woolen garment that transforms him from a boy into a Roman citizen with legal rights and protections. The toga was more than clothing. It was a passport, a shield, and a declaration all wrapped into one. Only free Roman men could wear it, and wearing one falsely could get you killed. Slaves, foreigners, and women were forbidden from donning this sacred garment. When Lucius wraps those 18 feet of wool around his body in the traditional way, he's not just getting dressed. He's claiming his place as a member of the most powerful civilization on Earth. But here's the thing about togas. They were absolutely impractical. Imagine trying to run, work, or even eat comfortably while wrapped in a heavy woolen blanket that could unravel if you moved wrong. Most Romans wore them only for formal occasions, preferring the much more sensible tunic for daily life. The tunic was like the great equalizer. Everyone wore one, from the emperor to the lowest slave. Yet even tunics told stories. The length mattered, the color mattered, the fabric mattered. A slave's tunic was rough, short, and brown or gray. A wealthy merchant might wear a tunic of fine linen dyed in expensive colors. The details whispered secrets about bank accounts, family connections, and social standing to anyone who knew how to read the sign. For women, the rules were just as strict, but completely different. A respectable Roman matron wore a stola, a long dress that announced her married status and good reputation. Over this, she might drape a palla, a cloak that served as both fashion and protection from gossip. The way a woman arranged her palla could signal whether she was available for conversation or wanted to be left alone. But here's where the story gets really interesting. There was a special toga called the toga praetexta, distinguished by its purple border. This wasn't just any purple. It was made from thousands of murex shells and cost more than most people earned in a year. Senators wore this toga as a symbol of their power and wisdom. But so did something else that might surprise you. Free Roman children. Young boys and girls both wore the toga praetexta until they came of age. For boys, this meant until they were around 14 or 15 years old, when they would trade their purple-bordered childhood toga for the pure white toga of adult citizenship. For girls, it meant until they married and began wearing the stola of a wife. The purple border was supposed to be sacred, a protection blessed by the gods themselves. Romans believed it kept children safe from harm and evil spirits. But life in ancient Rome was unpredictable and dangerous. Sometimes that sacred purple border would become stained with blood, from a playground accident, a fall, or something far worse. When that happened, the magic was considered broken. The toga praetexta had to be thrown away, and the child would immediately transition to adult clothing, ready or not. A blood-stained purple border meant childhood was over, sometimes tragically and suddenly. It was a harsh reminder that in Roman society, even the clothes on your back carried the weight of fate and the fragility of life. This system of dress codes created a world where your wardrobe was your identity, your protection, and sometimes your prison. Every morning, Romans didn't just get dressed. They put on their place in society with all the privileges and limitations that came with it. Let me tell you about a typical day in young Marcus's life, because his story will show you just how different Roman leisure time was from ours. Marcus is 12 years old, the son of a wealthy merchant, and he's about to experience three very different sides of Roman entertainment and education. His day starts before dawn with something that would make modern kids cringe: school. But here's the catch. Marcus is one of the lucky few. In Rome, education was a privilege reserved almost exclusively for boys from wealthy families. Girls stayed home to learn household management from their mothers, while poor children went straight to work. Marcus sits on a hard wooden bench in his teacher's house, practicing his Latin grammar and learning the art of rhetoric, the skill of speaking persuasively that every Roman gentleman needed to master. The teaching method was brutal by today's standards. Students memorized entire speeches by heart, recited poetry until their voices were hoarse, and faced the sting of the teacher's rod if they made mistakes. But this wasn't just about reading and writing. Marcus was learning to become a powerful speaker who could sway crowds, win court cases, and maybe even address the Senate one day. After his morning lessons, Marcus rushes to meet his father at the amphitheater. Today there are gladiator games, and the entire city is buzzing with excitement. But here's something that might surprise you. These games weren't just mindless violence. They were carefully orchestrated political theater. The politician sponsoring today's games stands in the imperial box, watching as the crowd's mood shifts with every sword thrust and shield clash. When a gladiator falls, the crowd's thumbs decide his fate, but the sponsor is watching something else entirely: how loudly they cheer his name, how much they appreciate the spectacle he's provided. These games could make or break political careers. A boring show meant voters would remember you poorly come election time. A spectacular event with exotic animals and skilled fighters could launch you to the highest offices in the empire. Marcus watches wide-eyed as gladiators who were prisoners of war or condemned criminals fight with weapons and techniques from across the known world. There's a retiarius with his net and trident, fighting like a fisherman trying to catch a deadly fish. A murmillo with his heavy shield and sword, moving like a walking fortress. Each fight tells a story: Rome's dominance over foreign lands, the triumph of civilization over chaos, the reward that comes to those who serve the empire well. But the best part of Marcus's day is still to come. As the afternoon sun beats down mercilessly, his father suggests they visit the baths. The Roman baths weren't just places to get clean. They were the social heart of the city, where emperors and slaves, senators and shopkeepers all came together under one roof. Here's where Roman engineering truly shined. The baths had something that wouldn't be common in Europe again for over 1,000 years after Rome fell: central heating. Furnaces beneath the floors heated air that circulated through hollow walls and under raised floors, keeping the entire complex warm even in winter. Hot, warm, and cold pools offered different experiences, while steam rooms and saunas provided relaxation that felt almost magical. Marcus and his father start in the hot room, where the intense heat opens their pores and makes them sweat out the day's stress. Slaves scrape their skin clean with bronze tools called strigils, since soap as we know it didn't exist yet. They move to the warm pool for a leisurely soak, then shock their systems with a plunge into the cold pool. But the real magic happens in the spaces between the pools. This is where deals are made, gossip is shared, and friendships are forged. Marcus's father conducts business negotiations while floating in the warm water. Senators discuss politics while getting massages. Merchants share trade secrets while relaxing in the steam room. The baths are where Roman society truly comes together, where class distinctions blur in the democratic equality of nakedness and shared relaxation. As evening approaches and they prepare to leave, Marcus realizes he's experienced the full spectrum of Roman leisure, the privilege of education that shapes future leaders, the spectacle of gladiatorial games that reinforces social order, and the communal luxury of the baths where all Romans can find momentary peace and connection. These weren't just ways to pass time. They were the pillars that held Roman society together, creating shared experiences and common bonds that united an empire stretching from Britain to the Middle East. Let me tell you about Gaius Antonius and his family, because their morning routine will show you just how deeply superstition and family hierarchy shaped every moment of Roman life. It's dawn, and Gaius is already awake, not because he wants to be, but because the household gods demand his attention. Before anyone else stirs, Gaius stands before the small shrine in his home's central courtyard. This isn't just decoration, it's the spiritual heart of his family. Here live the lares, the protective spirits of his household, and the penates, the guardians of his family's food and prosperity. He sprinkles wine and places small offerings of bread and honey before their tiny statues, whispering prayers for his family's safety and success. This might seem like a simple morning ritual, but it reveals something profound about Roman society. Gaius isn't just a father, he's the paterfamilias, a role that carried power our modern world can barely comprehend. By Roman law, he held the power of life and death over every person in his household, his wife, his children, his slaves, even his adult sons, until they established their own families. This wasn't just a legal technicality. When Gaius's first son was born 15 years ago, the midwife placed the newborn at his feet and waited. If Gaius had picked up the child, it would live and become part of the family. If he had walked away, the infant would have been left to die or sold into slavery. The decision was entirely his, with no questions asked by law or society. His wife Julia understands this hierarchy intimately. She's not powerless. Roman women had more freedom than women in many other ancient societies. But she knows that her husband's word is final in all family matters. She manages the household slaves, makes decisions about daily life, and has significant influence over her children's upbringing, but always within the framework of Gaius's ultimate authority. But here's where Roman life gets really interesting. Despite Gaius's legal power, the family lives in constant awareness of forces beyond human control. Every decision, every action, every moment is influenced by an intricate web of superstitions that would seem bizarre to us today. Take this morning, for example. As Gaius prepares to leave for the forum to conduct business, his youngest son suddenly sneezes. Everyone in the household freezes. A sneeze before leaving the house is a terrible omen, a warning from the gods that danger awaits outside. Gaius doesn't just ignore this, he can't afford to. In a world where disease, accidents, and violence lurk around every corner, ignoring the gods' warnings could mean disaster. So Gaius sits back down, frustrated, but resigned. He'll wait for a more favorable sign. Maybe the flight of birds or a servant accidentally dropping something in a lucky direction. His business deals will have to wait, because the spiritual world has spoken. And no Roman, no matter how powerful, dares to ignore such clear divine guidance. Julia watches all this with practiced patience. She's learned to read the dozens of omens that govern daily life. The way oil spreads in water, the direction a dog howls, the pattern of cracks in sacrificial animal bones. All these signs must be interpreted and respected. She keeps a mental catalog of lucky and unlucky days, favorable and dangerous activities, protective rituals, and warning signs. Their teenage daughter Claudia is learning these lessons too, but she's also discovering something else about Roman family life. The strange mix of protection and vulnerability that comes with being born into this world. As a daughter of a wealthy family, she'll have more opportunities than most women of her time. She might even have some say in choosing her husband, unlike many girls who are simply traded between families for political or economic advantage. But she's also learning that her future is entirely dependent on the men in her life, first her father, then her husband, and eventually her sons. The household gods that protect her now will eventually belong to another family when she marries, and she'll have to adapt to new spiritual traditions and new forms of domestic authority. The youngest son, Marcus, is absorbing lessons about power and responsibility that will shape his entire life. He's watching his father exercise absolute authority while simultaneously bowing to the will of supernatural forces. He's learning that being Roman means commanding respect from those below you while showing reverence to the gods above you. As the morning progresses and more favorable omens finally appear, Gaius prepares to leave again. He touches the small amulet around his neck, mutters a protective prayer, and steps into the Roman street. His family's rhythm will continue throughout the day, a careful balance of human ambition and divine submission, of absolute power and complete vulnerability, of practical decisions and mystical guidance. This is the hidden foundation of Roman civilization, not just the grand politics and military conquests we read about in history books, but the intimate daily dance between family loyalty and spiritual fear that shaped every Roman home and every Roman heart. As our journey through the streets of ancient Rome comes to an end, I want you to imagine something with me. Picture Marcus, our young Roman friend, finally arriving home as the sun sets over the 7 hills. He's tired from his day at school, his mind still buzzing with the excitement of the gladiator games, his skin still warm from the luxurious baths. He sits down to a simple dinner with his family, unaware that 2,000 years later, we'd still be fascinated by the way he lived his ordinary, extraordinary life. Roman life was like a magnificent tapestry woven from threads of luxury and simplicity, innovation and tradition, cruelty and compassion. In every detail we've explored today, from the humblest bowl of wheat porridge to the most elaborate senatorial toga, we've seen a society that was both remarkably sophisticated and surprisingly human. Think about it. Romans worried about their appearance, gossiped at social gatherings, tried to impress their neighbors, and looked for signs of good fortune in their daily lives. They valued education, loved entertainment, cherished their families, and feared the unknown. When you strip away the togas and the gladiators, the marble columns and the Latin phrases, what you find are people who faced the same fundamental human challenges we face today. The wealthy Romans who sweetened their wine with deadly lead remind us that even the most advanced civilizations can be blind to dangers that seem obvious in hindsight. The careful social rules that govern their clothing choices echo in our own unspoken dress codes and status symbols. The communal spaces of the Roman baths mirror our modern coffee shops and community centers, where people from all walks of life come together to relax and connect. Their superstitions might seem strange to us, but aren't we still looking for signs of luck and meaning in our daily lives? Their family hierarchies were different from ours, but the bonds of love, responsibility, and protection that held Roman families together are the same forces that shape families today. Perhaps most remarkably, the Romans gave us systems and ideas that still govern our lives. Our legal systems trace their roots back to Roman law. Our languages, especially if you speak Spanish, French, Italian, or Portuguese, are descendants of the Latin that Roman children learned in those harsh ancient schools. Our architectural styles, from the Capitol building in Washington to the grand train stations of Europe, echo the engineering brilliance of Roman builders. Even our entertainment industry learned from Roman innovations. The gladiatorial games, for all their brutality, were masterpieces of spectacle and crowd psychology that influenced everything from modern sports to Hollywood blockbusters. The Romans understood something that we're still learning, that entertainment isn't just about fun, it's about bringing communities together and creating shared experiences that bind societies together. The Romans also left us their mistakes to learn from. Their reliance on slave labor, their casual acceptance of extreme inequality, their use of violence as entertainment, these remind us that technological advancement and cultural sophistication don't automatically create moral progress. Every society, including our own, has blind spots that future generations will judge harshly. But perhaps the most important lesson from Roman daily life is simply this: ordinary people living ordinary lives can create extraordinary civilizations. The empire that lasted over 1,000 years wasn't built by emperors alone. It was built by countless individuals like Marcus and his family, making small daily choices about how to live, what to value, and how to treat one another. Standing here at the end of our journey, looking back across 20 centuries, the question isn't whether we're different from the Romans. The question is how we're the same. and what that tells us about the enduring human spirit that connects us all across the vast expanse of time. Every morning when you wake up, you're continuing a story that began in the streets of ancient Rome and will continue long after we're gone. You're part of the same human adventure that drove Romans to build roads across continents, write poetry that still moves us, and create laws that still govern us. That's not just history. That's the ongoing story of what it means to be human.